Bob, can you please tell me why a federal contractor is asking about soil reports from 2009? That was 8:54 a.m. on a Monday, and by that point I'd already refilled my travel mug twice with break room coffee that tasted like burnt disappointment. But sure, I could fix this just like I fixed the 6 other client meltdowns last week and the 4 crisis calls the week before that. I took a breath, adjusted my reading glasses, and said the thing I always say when I'm about to get an entire corporation back on track. I'm on it. Name's Robert Harrison. Most folks call me Bob. I'm 48 years old, and for the past 12 years, I've been the guy keeping Midwest Energy Solutions running smooth as a Swiss watch. You know how some people talk about being indispensable? Well, I never liked that word. Makes you sound arrogant. But when it came to our crown jewel account with Great Lakes Power Authority, worth $185 million, I was pretty close to it. That account was a beast of complexity. We're talking interstate power grid infrastructure, federal oversight, FERC compliance, DOE regulations, the kind of work that can make or break a company overnight. My military logistics background from my Army days taught me that systems work when everyone knows their role and sticks to it. Civilian corporate world, same principle, different uniform. I made it all run like clockwork. Quiet, reliable, taken for granted. That's exactly how I preferred it, to be honest. I didn't need my name on plaques or fancy LinkedIn posts about thought leadership. I just wanted my work respected and my clients happy, which, as you'll see, wasn't going to last much longer. Now, if you've ever been the guy who keeps the chaos from tipping into catastrophe, who makes the whole operation look effortless while everyone else gets promoted for handling one simple task, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I was the duct tape holding this place together, and management had started acting like duct tape was some kind of outdated technology. Speaking of outdated technology, that brings me to the main character in this story. Besides me, anyway. Austin Grant had been floating around the executive floor for about 6 months, like a tech startup poster boy who'd gotten lost on his way to Silicon Valley. Fresh out of some Ivy League MBA program with more buzzwords than actual experience, this kid was the CEO's son and our newly minted VP of Digital Transformation. That title alone should have been a red flag the size of Texas. Getting back to that Monday morning crisis call, I'd just finished calming down our Great Lakes representative, Patricia Matthews, a woman who once threatened to pull our entire contract over a typo in an environmental impact footnote. Patricia didn't mess around when it came to compliance, and frankly, that's exactly why I respected her. In this business, attention to detail isn't just professional courtesy. It's the difference between keeping the lights on and facing federal investigations. I was drafting a follow-up email to Patricia, making sure every comma was in the right place, when Austin walked into my office. "Hey, Bob," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk like he owned the place, which, technically, his family kind of did. "We need to talk about modernizing your workflow." My spine went rigid. You spend enough years in corporate America. You learn to recognize certain phrases that sound helpful but actually mean we're about to mess with something that works perfectly fine. Modernizing ranked right up there with synergizing and optimizing on my list of words that make experienced professionals reach for the antacids. Austin had that dangerous combination of ignorance and authority that always leads to disaster. He'd been promoted not because he'd earned it through years of grinding out solutions and building client relationships, but because the CEO couldn't tell his only son no at Sunday dinner. I'd seen this movie before, and it never ended well for the people actually doing the work. "I think we can optimize this whole process," he continued, gesturing at my monitor like it personally offended him. "You do a lot of manual relationship management, but have you considered automating that with AI chatbots?" "With what?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I knew where this was heading. "Exactly. We could streamline everything. Replace those time-consuming phone calls with automated workflows. Our clients want efficiency, not old-school hand-holding." Somewhere in Great Lakes Power's operations center, a grid operator probably felt a disturbance in the force. But I nodded, took notes, and smiled like he'd just explained electricity to Thomas Edison himself. Because that's what you do when someone with the right last name is determined to disrupt your life's work. The thing is, Austin wasn't entirely wrong about efficiency. But there's a difference between efficient and effective, and that difference usually shows up when something goes sideways at 2 a.m., and you need someone who actually understands the system to fix it. Chatbots don't handle compliance audits. They don't smooth over federal regulators who are asking pointed questions about documentation. And they sure don't manage the kind of relationship I'd built with Patricia Matthews over years of proving that when she called, things got handled properly. But try explaining that to someone who thinks every problem can be solved with an app. The rest of that week blurred into what I'd come to recognize as the usual corporate scramble. You know how it goes. Management makes grand announcements about transformation initiatives, while the people actually running the business keep everything from falling apart. Tuesday brought a vendor compliance issue that had our procurement team in full panic mode. The kind of thing that sounds simple until you realize it involves 3 different federal agencies, 2 state regulatory bodies, and enough paperwork to deforest a small county. I spent 4 hours on the phone untangling regulations that Austin probably didn't even know existed. Wednesday was Patricia Matthews calling about missing documentation for our quarterly infrastructure assessment. Now, Patricia wasn't the type to call unless something was genuinely wrong. When she said missing, she meant this could trigger a federal review if we don't fix it immediately. So I located the time-stamped submissions in our archive system, the same system I'd organized 3 years ago because our previous filing method was basically throw everything in a box and hope for the best. Meanwhile, Austin disappeared into what he called innovation workshops with the marketing intern he'd started calling his digital strategist. I'm not making that up. This kid had convinced himself that running social media campaigns qualified someone to redesign operational processes that kept the electrical grid functioning. Thursday brought the kind of breakthrough that made all the week's chaos worthwhile. Our quarterly compliance report got approved on the first submission. No revisions, no follow-up questions, no federal auditor requesting clarification meetings. Patricia Matthews herself sent a thank you email directly to me, which in her world was equivalent to a standing ovation. Outstanding work on the grid modernization documentation, she wrote. Your attention to regulatory cross-references saved us significant review time. Looking forward to our Thursday status call. That Thursday status call, by the way, had never been missed in the 12 years I'd been managing this account. Not during the Chicago blackout of 2019, not during our server migration disaster when half our systems went down for 3 days, not even when Patricia's husband was in the hospital and she took the call from the ICU waiting room. At 4:52 p.m. that Thursday, I was still feeling good about Patricia's email when my calendar pinged with a meeting notification that made my blood run cold. Meeting 5:00 p.m., HR conference room. No sender, no subject line, no agenda, just that. You know what they say about gut instincts? Well, mine started screaming like a smoke detector with a dying battery. When you've worked in corporate America long enough, you develop a sixth sense for these things. This wasn't about updating my benefits package or discussing professional development opportunities. I grabbed my folder, the one I always carried for client meetings, and headed down that beige hallway feeling like a man walking to his own execution. The funny thing about these moments is how your mind starts cataloging details you'd normally ignore. The squeaky third tile from the elevator, the motivational poster about teamwork that somebody had hung crooked 6 months ago, the way the fluorescent lights made everything look like a medical examination room. I didn't know it yet, but the Bob Harrison who walked into that conference room wasn't coming back out. Austin was already seated when I arrived, looking like he was posing for a stock photo about disruptive leadership. You know the type. Perfectly pressed shirt, tablet positioned just so, expression of serious concern that probably took practice in the mirror. HR manager Linda Foster sat beside him with the expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Linda was good people, actually. She'd been with the company for 15 years, back when HR actually meant helping employees instead of just protecting management from lawsuits. The fact that she looked like she wanted to crawl under the table told me everything I needed to know about how this meeting was going to go. Austin didn't even look up from his tablet until I closed the door behind me. The sound seemed unnaturally loud in the small room. "Bob," he said, trying to project that business school confidence they teach in leadership seminars. "Thanks for coming on such short notice." I said nothing, just sat down and waited. You learn after years of being the adult in every room that silence can be your best weapon. Let them make the first move. Let them show their cards before you reveal yours. Austin cleared his throat and straightened his tie like he was about to deliver a TED Talk on innovation. "So this isn't easy," he began, but after careful analysis of our operational synergies and digital transformation roadmap, he actually used those exact words. "We've determined your role isn't aligned with our forward-facing initiatives." There it was. Corporate speak for "you're done, old man." I looked at Linda. Her eyes darted away like she'd been caught shoplifting. HR, the department that used to be called personnel back when companies actually cared about people. Austin kept talking, cheerful as a software update notification. We appreciate everything you've contributed over the years, but we're streamlining account management to create a more agile, tech-enabled structure. Translation: we think an algorithm can do your job better than you can. I didn't blink. You're firing me. A pause stretched between us, just long enough to let the awkwardness fill every corner of that sterile conference room. It's not personal, Austin said, flashing a smile that probably cost his parents a fortune in orthodontics. We'll be handling the client relationships through automated systems now, much more efficient. And there it was. The moment when entitled ignorance collided headfirst with operational reality. I glanced at Linda again. Her mouth was pressed into a line so thin it could have cut glass. She slid a manila envelope across the table with the enthusiasm of someone handling radioactive waste. Severance package, NDA clause. The same corporate script I'd seen play out a dozen times over the years. "Do you have any questions?" Austin asked, already looking at his phone. Kids these days. Attention spans shorter than a mayfly's lifespan. We're giving you until end of day to transition your files. The clock on the wall said 5:07 p.m. Generous of them. I opened the envelope, scanned the contents, then did something that clearly wasn't in Austin's playbook. I laughed. Not loud, not bitter. Just a quiet puff of breath. The kind that says, "Son, you just stepped on a landmine you thought was a speed bump." "No questions," I said, standing up and straightening my jacket. I slid the envelope back across the table like a restaurant check I wasn't planning to pay. Then I walked out, leaving Austin looking confused and Linda looking relieved. Here's the thing about dramatic exits that you see in movies. They're mostly nonsense. Real professionals don't storm out throwing papers in the air or delivering devastating speeches that somehow make everyone realize their mistake. Real professionals just leave. Quietly. With dignity intact. I walked to my desk, my corner spot with the view of Lake Michigan that I'd earned through 12 years of late nights, weekend calls, and more client emergencies than I could count. My nameplate still caught the afternoon light just right. I sat down, logged into my computer one last time. No file deletions, no angry farewell emails, no burning bridges or salting the earth behind me. Just one folder left open on my desktop. Client contracts. Active renewals. Clearly labeled, meticulously organized, completely untouched by Austin's digital transformation. That's when I remembered something that made me smile for the first time all day. 6 months ago, after a multi-agency compliance audit nearly torpedoed our Great Lakes account, I'd pushed through a renewal clause that named me personally as the mandatory liaison for that client. It wasn't ego, it was pure operational necessity. Patricia Matthews had specifically requested it after Austin's first attempt at client engagement nearly resulted in a federal investigation. "We can't afford another learning curve," Patricia had said during one of our weekly calls. "Put it in writing that we work with you directly." So we did. Amendment 7B, Section 12A, tied to Contract GL 4185, executed, time-stamped, signed by the executive sponsor, one Austin Grant, who was trying to prove he could handle legacy account management. The irony was delicious. I opened my file drawer, pulled out a flash drive, and copied one specific document. Not for revenge, for protocol. Military training dies hard, and good soldiers always keep documentation. Then I shut down my computer, took my framed photo of my dad from Korea off the desk, and tucked it into my briefcase. Left the pens, left the coffee mug with the faded company logo, left everything else that didn't matter. On my way out, I passed Austin in the hallway. He was explaining something about leveraging synergistic solutions to someone from finance, using hand gestures like he was conducting an invisible orchestra. He didn't even notice me walking by. Perfect, because what came next, he never saw coming. Outside, the Chicago sky had turned the color of old steel, and the wind off Lake Michigan felt like change coming. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary, then walked to my car, silent and smiling. Not because I was okay with what had happened, because I knew something Austin didn't. That contract was still active. And he'd just walked into a legal buzzsaw wearing a designer suit. By the time I got home to my apartment in Lincoln Park, I'd mentally shifted gears. The dog, a 10-year-old golden retriever named Murphy, barely looked up from his spot on the couch when I walked in. After 12 years of unpredictable work schedules, he'd learned not to get too excited about my arrival times. I loosened my tie, poured myself a beer, not a celebration, just ritual, and opened my laptop on the kitchen table. You see, I'm not the kind of man who goes quietly into corporate retirement. I'm the kind who reads contracts, all of them, every clause, every amendment, every forgotten addendum filed on a random Tuesday after a client emergency. The Amendment 7B document opened on my screen like a roadmap to vindication. There it was, clear as daylight in Section 12A. In the event that the designated liaison, Robert Harrison, is terminated, transferred, or removed from active participation without written consent from Great Lakes Power Authority, said removal shall constitute material breach of contract and grounds for immediate contract review, up to and including termination for cause. Simple, unmistakable, legally binding, and signed by Austin Grant himself. I didn't send the email out of spite or wounded pride. I sent it because it was my professional obligation, even if they'd just told me I didn't have that obligation anymore. I opened Outlook and drafted a message, short, clinical, no emotion. Subject, Continuity Clause Documentation, Contract GL 4185. Body, per the attached executed amendment dated April 15th. I am formally documenting a potential compliance breach related to service continuity for Great Lakes Power Authority. Please confirm receipt and advise on remediation protocols. Attached, Contract GL 4185 Amendment 7B Section 12A. CC Internal Legal Counsel, External Compliance Officer, BCC, Patricia Matthews, General Counsel, Great Lakes Power Authority. My finger hovered over the send button for exactly 3 seconds. Then I clicked it. The email disappeared into cyberspace like a guided missile with a very specific target. I stared at my laptop screen for exactly 30 seconds after that email disappeared, beer untouched, heart steady as a metronome. This wasn't revenge, this was documentation. Sometimes the best weapon is simply the truth, delivered at precisely the right moment to exactly the right person. Then I closed the laptop, finished my beer, and took Murphy for his evening walk around the neighborhood like it was any other Thursday. But something fundamental had shifted in the air. You know that electric tension you feel right before a thunderstorm breaks? It wasn't fear, it was clarity. Austin thought he'd pulled off a strategic masterstroke, clearing out the old guard to make room for his digital revolution. He thought he could replace 12 years of relationship management with chatbots and automation. What he'd actually done was amputate a vital organ without bothering to check if the patient needed it to survive. And tomorrow morning, the flatline alarm was going to start screaming. I slept better that night than I had in months. Amazing what a clear conscience will do for your rest. The building's HVAC system kicked on at 7:58 a.m. like clockwork, but that Friday morning, the mechanical hum sounded different, urgent, like the building itself was trying to warn everyone inside that something was about to go very wrong. At 8:17 a.m., CEO Thomas Grant's phone lit up with a subject line no executive ever wants to see before their second cup of coffee. Service termination notice, contract GL 4185. Thomas opened it, read it, stopped breathing for about 5 seconds, then read it again. Patricia Matthews had written it herself, and she didn't waste words. This correspondence confirms receipt of documentation indicating breach of service continuity under contract GL 4185. Termination of Robert Harrison without prior client consultation constitutes violation of Amendment 7B Section 12A. Per contractual terms, this may be grounds for immediate contract review and termination for cause. Please advise your remediation strategy within 48 hours. No pleasantries. No hope this finds you well. Just a legal precision strike that hit like a sledgehammer to the solar plexus. Thomas stared at his screen like he was reading his own corporate obituary. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang insistently. He didn't answer it. He just turned slowly toward Austin's office. The kid was at his desk, scrolling through his phone with the casual confidence of someone who'd never read a binding contract in his life, probably checking LinkedIn for motivational quotes about disruption. Thomas walked over without hurrying, like a man moving underwater. He stopped at Austin's doorway and said, barely above a whisper, "Tell me you didn't fire Bob without checking his contract status." Austin looked up with that blank expression kids get when adults start talking about consequences. "What do you mean?" Thomas's hand tightened around his phone. He didn't repeat the question. Just walked into the office and set the device gently on Austin's keyboard, email still open. Austin read the first line, paused, scrolled down, scrolled back up. Then came that moment of pure panic people get when they realize they've just stepped on something that's about to explode in their face. I didn't know about Section 12A, Austin stammered, color draining from his face like someone had pulled a plug. Nobody flagged it during the transition planning. Thomas looked at his son the way a mechanic might look at an engine that just threw a rod through the block. Amendment 7B, you signed it. April 15th, you were the executive sponsor. But nobody told me it was legally binding. Bob wrote it, Thomas said, his voice getting tight. Bob is the binding part. By 10:02 a.m., it wasn't whispered crisis management anymore. It was full-scale corporate emergency response. The legal team descended on document archives like investigators at a crime scene. Files flying open, emails searched by date and keyword, anything to prove there was some kind of backup plan or escape clause. There wasn't. No alternate liaison designated with Great Lakes Power, no transition documentation filed, no delegated authority memo, nothing except Austin's cheerful HR filing where he'd declared that Bob Harrison's legacy responsibilities would be seamlessly absorbed by our digital transformation team. That phrase, seamlessly absorbed, now read like something a college freshman would write for a business ethics case study on spectacular failure. Meanwhile, client services had tried calling Great Lakes Power 4 times. No answer. The 5th attempt went straight to voicemail. The email responses weren't any better. Patricia Matthews had sent read receipts but no actual replies. No thanks for reaching out. No, we'll discuss this internally. Nothing but professional silence that spoke louder than any angry response could have. By 11:07 a.m., they'd officially missed their weekly Thursday status call. That call had never been missed. Not once in 12 years. Thomas called an emergency meeting. No calendar invites, no agenda, just names scrawled on a whiteboard. CEO, legal, finance, Austin. Inside the glass-walled conference room with blinds drawn tight, the facts came out sharp and clinical. No successor, liaison designated. No client notification issued. No evidence of consent prior to termination. No transition protocols followed. I don't see what the big deal is, Austin said, trying to salvage some authority. We're the vendor. We determine staffing decisions. Not when the client mandates specific personnel in a binding contract, legal counsel replied, adjusting her glasses with the patience of someone explaining physics to a toddler. That's not a suggestion. That's enforceable law. The damage assessment when it came was brutal. If Great Lakes Power walked away, Q4 revenue would drop by $42.3 million. Secondary accounts tied to their approval would freeze, adding another $28.7 million in risk. Recovery timeline, 12 to 18 months, assuming they could rebuild their vendor rating and federal contractor status. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was radioactive. That's when the final email arrived, 6:47 p.m. on Friday, after most people had gone home. Patricia Matthews, brief as always, effective immediately, Great Lakes Power Authority will be working exclusively through Harrison Strategic Consulting for all technical and compliance matters. Mr. Harrison understands our requirements. No threats, no legal posturing, just business. By Monday morning, Austin Grant's digital transformation had transformed exactly one thing, a 12-year employee into their most expensive consultant. And that, gentlemen, is how you turn a pink slip into a promotion.